The docking bay of Crossroads Station echoed with a sound that made every species within earshot flinch. It wasn't the familiar hum of cargo freighter engines spinning down after a long haul. It wasn't the sharp hiss of airlock seals or the clang of loading equipment. No, this was something far worse. This was crying. The desperate, high-pitched wailing of infants who couldn't be comforted, and it had been going on for 3 straight days without stopping. Mike Harris wiped a thick smear of grease from his calloused hands onto an already filthy rag. He'd been shoulder-deep in the engine compartment of a Centauri freighter for the past 6 hours, replacing a busted coolant line that should have been swapped out 2 maintenance cycles ago. His back ached, his knees protested every time he stood up, and he was pretty sure he'd scraped the same knuckle raw for the 4th time this week. Just another Tuesday on the station. But that crying. That soul-crushing, never-ending wailing. It cut through the usual docking bay noise like a plasma torch through hull plating. Mike peered around the landing strut of the freighter, squinting against the harsh overhead lights. Bay 7 sat just 50 yards away, and that's where all the commotion was coming from. A massive creature paced back and forth in tight, anxious circles. Her scales were a deep purple that shimmered and caught the light with every movement, like she was covered in thousands of precious gems. She had to be 12 feet tall at least, maybe more. Wings folded tight against her muscular back. A long tail swept behind her with each step. Drakvan. One of the dragon-like species that most folks on the station gave a very wide berth to. And for good reason. Drakvan weren't known for their friendly dispositions, especially when it came to their young. They were fierce warriors, protective parents, and absolutely not the kind of beings you wanted to upset. In her massive arms, cradled as gently as those clawed hands could manage, were 3 small shapes that squirmed and screamed and wouldn't stop no matter what she did. "Poor thing hasn't slept in 70 hours straight," came Beth's voice from above. Mike glanced up to see the station's traffic controller watching from the safety of her control booth, her face pressed against the reinforced glass. Beth had been working Crossroads for 15 years and had seen just about everything. But even she looked worried. Station security won't go anywhere near her. You know how Drakvan get about their young. Last guy who got too close to a Drakvan mother and her kids lost an arm. Actually lost it. They had to grow him a new one. Mike turned his attention back to Bay 7. The mother, whose name showed up as Kara on the docking manifest displayed on the nearby terminal, was clearly at the end of her rope. Her movements were stiff and jerky, the kind of motion that came from bone-deep exhaustion. She swayed with one baby, then shifted to bounce another, then tried humming a deep, resonant sound that probably would have been beautiful if it wasn't so full of desperation. Nothing worked. The 3 hatchlings just cried harder, their tiny voices cracking with the effort. Other aliens in the docking bay had given up trying to work. A group of insectoid traders stood in a cluster near Bay 4, their antennae quivering with agitation. A hulking cargo hauler with 6 arms had actually abandoned his shipment halfway through unloading and retreated to his vessel. Even the maintenance bots seemed to be moving faster than usual, as if trying to finish their tasks and get out of earshot. Mike felt something twist in his chest. He knew that look on Kara's face. The exhaustion, yeah, but more than that. The fear. The helpless terror of a parent who tried everything they knew and nothing was working. He'd seen that exact same expression on his sister Jenny's face 5 years ago when her twins wouldn't stop screaming no matter what she did. Night after night of walking the floor, trying every trick in the book, watching those tiny faces scrunch up and cry and cry and cry. "Someone should help," Mike said quietly, still staring at Kara. There was a long pause from the control booth above. Then Beth's voice came through again, flat with disbelief. "You volunteering to approach an exhausted Drakvan mother? Are you volunteering for that, Harris? Because I'm not writing that incident report. I'm really not. They'll think I made it up." Mike grabbed a clean rag from his toolbox and tucked it into his belt. He checked his comm unit was working. Not that it would do much good if Kara decided he was a threat, but at least they'd find his body faster. He started walking toward Bay 7 with steady, deliberate steps. Behind him, Beth's voice crackled over his personal comm channel. "You're insane, Harris. Completely insane. I'm putting medical on standby." Maybe she was right. Maybe this was crazy. But Mike had grown up in a house full of kids. He was the oldest of 4, and his sister Jenny had moved back home when her twins were born. He'd spent months helping with those colicky babies, learning every trick in the book. He knew that particular flavor of parental desperation when he saw it. And he knew something else too. Sometimes the solution was simpler than anyone expected. Sometimes you just needed someone willing to try. His boots echoed on the metal decking as he approached Bay 7, each step bringing him closer to either the stupidest decision of his life or maybe, just maybe, something good. Hey there. Mike kept his voice low and steady, the way you talk to a spooked horse. His hands were held out at his sides, palms open and visible, showing he carried nothing that could be a weapon. Each step forward was slow and deliberate. Kara's head snapped toward him so fast that Mike actually flinched. Her eyes blazed yellow, pupils narrowing to slits that seemed to bore right through him. A deep, rumbling growl started somewhere in her chest and built until Mike could feel it vibrating in his own ribcage. It was the universal language that needed no translator. Back off or die. Simple as that. Mike stopped dead in his tracks, a good 10 feet away from her. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to stay calm and keep his breathing steady. He could see her muscles tensing under those purple scales, see the way her wings twitched like she was ready to spread them wide and make herself even more intimidating. One of the hatchlings in her arms let out another piercing wail, and Kara's attention flickered between her babies and this strange human who had the nerve to approach. I know, Mike said, keeping that same calm tone. I'm small. I'm probably really annoying right now. And you definitely don't think you need help from a human. He gestured carefully toward the crying hatchlings, making sure his movements were slow and non-threatening. But I've seen that look before. That exact look on your face. You've tried everything, haven't you? Every single thing you can think of. The Drakvan's eyes narrowed even further, studying him with an intensity that made Mike want to take a step back. But he held his ground. Everything, she said finally, her voice rough and raw like she'd been screaming herself. The universal translator in his earpiece gave her words a slight mechanical delay, but the exhaustion came through crystal clear. 3 days. 3 entire days. Nothing works. Not feeding them, not the songs my mother taught me, not adjusting the temperature, not holding them differently. Nothing. And they grow weaker with every hour. I can see it. Mike heard the crack in her voice on those last words. This wasn't just frustration. This was terror. The absolute helpless terror of a parent watching their children suffer and not being able to stop it. One of the hatchlings, the smallest one cradled in her left arm, let out a particularly pitiful wail that seemed to echo off the metal walls of the docking bay. The little thing's voice cracked halfway through, like it was running out of steam. Kara's fierce expression cracked right along with it, and Mike saw something he hadn't expected to see on the face of a 12-foot warrior species. Real, genuine fear. The kind that made your stomach drop and your hands shake. Let me try something, Mike said, taking one careful step closer. Just with one of them. Give me 5 minutes. If it doesn't work, if I can't help, I'll walk away and leave you alone. I promise. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Kara stared at him, her yellow eyes searching his face for something. What? Mike wasn't sure. Signs of deception? Proof that he actually knew what he was talking about? Maybe just any reason at all to trust this random human mechanic with the most precious things in her entire world. Her shoulders sagged. Just a little, but enough that Mike could see the weight of those 3 sleepless days pressing down on her. If you harm them, she said slowly, and her voice dropped to something cold and deadly, there is nowhere in this galaxy you could hide from me. I won't, Mike said simply. I swear it. Kara looked down at her 3 babies, all crying in different pitches that somehow managed to create the worst harmony imaginable. She seemed to be having an internal debate, her clawed fingers flexing and unflexing around the hatchlings. Finally, slowly she lowered the smallest one toward Mike. The creature was about the size of a beagle, maybe 20 pounds, with soft purple scales that felt smooth and warm under Mike's hands. Tiny wings were folded tight against its back, still too small and underdeveloped to be of any use. Little nubs protruded from its head where horns would eventually grow in. The hatchling's eyes were squeezed shut as it screamed, its whole body rigid with distress. Mike adjusted his grip, cradling the baby close against his chest the way he used to hold his sister's twins. The hatchling was heavier than he'd expected, solid and warm like a living furnace. And loud. So incredibly loud. The screaming was happening directly into his chest now, and Mike was pretty sure his shirt was getting soaked with tears or whatever Drakvan babies produced when they cried. Then he started to rock. Side to side, gentle and easy. Not too fast, not too slow. Just a steady rhythm that came from muscle memory, from all those nights walking the floor with crying babies. He added a slight bounce, up and down, keeping the motion smooth and constant. And he hummed. Low and steady, an old tune his grandmother used to sing when he was little. He couldn't remember the words anymore, but the melody was burned into his brain. The hatchling's cries stuttered. The screaming stopped for just a second, and Mike felt the little body tense up like it was surprised. Then the crying started again, but weaker this time. Less frantic. The rigid muscles began to soften, just a fraction. Mike kept rocking. Kept humming. Didn't change anything about the rhythm or the pressure or the way he held the baby close where it could feel his heartbeat. Kara leaned forward, her enormous form casting a shadow over both of them. She hardly dared to breathe, watching with those yellow eyes wide and unblinking. Hope and disbelief warred across her face. Her other two hatchlings continued crying in her arms, but her complete attention was locked on Mike and the smallest baby. Waiting. Praying, maybe, in whatever way Drakvan prayed. Please work, her expression seemed to say. Please, please work. The attack came 2 days out from the colony world of Haven's Edge. Kate was running final system checks in the cockpit, going through her usual pre-landing routine with a cup of terrible instant coffee at her elbow. The ship systems were all showing green. Engines humming smooth. Life support stable. Navigation locked in. Everything was looking good for an easy approach to the colony when the proximity alarms started screaming. Kate's coffee went flying as she lunged for the scanner display. 3 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, appearing on her sensors like ghosts materializing from nothing. They were arranged in a standard intercept pattern, forming a triangle that boxed her in perfectly. No accident. No coincidence. This was planned. Her blood ran cold when she zoomed in on the ship's signatures. Krillian Raider-class vessels. Fast, heavily armed, and flown by some of the nastiest pirates in this sector. Krillians were known throughout the shipping lanes for exactly 2 things, and neither of them were good. Brutality and efficiency. They didn't waste time. They didn't take prisoners unless those prisoners could be sold. And they definitely didn't leave witnesses if witnesses became inconvenient. The comm crackled to life and a harsh, clicking voice filled the cockpit. Freighter persistence, cut your engines immediately and prepare for boarding. Resist in any way and we'll vent your hull to space. Your choice, human. Quick death or slow suffocation. Kate's hand hovered over the distress beacon mounted on the control panel. One press, that's all it would take. One press and an automated SOS would broadcast on all emergency frequencies. But even as her fingers touched the button, she knew the truth. They were too far from any patrol routes. The nearest military outpost was 3 days away at best. Even the fastest rescue ship wouldn't arrive in time to do anything except identify her frozen corpse. She looked back through the cockpit door, down the corridor toward the cargo bay. Through the open bulkhead she could see Carthax. The Void Dragon had raised his massive head, instantly alert. His purple scales rippled with tension, and those intelligent eyes were locked on her. He'd heard the transmission. He knew exactly what was happening. Stay back, Kate called to him, trying to sound calm and failing miserably. Her voice shook. They want cargo. We give them what they want and we live. That's how this works. Just stay in the cargo bay. Carthax's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. He'd been traveling with Kate for 6 months now. He'd learned to read human expressions, human body language, human voices. And he'd learned something else too. Humans were absolutely terrible liars, especially when they were scared. The boarding tube clamped onto her airlock with a metallic clang that echoed through the entire ship. Kate heard the hiss of pressure equalizing, the clunk of magnetic locks engaging. Then footsteps. Heavy, multiple sets of them. She moved to stand in the corridor, positioning herself between the airlock and the cargo bay entrance. If she could just keep them focused on her, maybe Carthax would have sense enough to stay hidden. 6 Krillian raiders poured through the airlock like a wave of armored nightmares. They were big, easily 7 feet tall, with 4 arms each ending in claws that could rip through metal. Their bodies were covered in natural armor plating, thick shells that had evolved over millions of years to shrug off just about anything nature could throw at them. And now they carried plasma rifles, weapons that could punch holes through ship hulls like they were made of paper. The leader was bigger than the others, his shell scarred and pitted from countless fights. A massive crack ran across his carapace like a lightning bolt, proof that someone had gotten in a good hit once upon a time. He'd survived it, obviously. Thrived on it, probably. He clicked his mandibles together in what passed for Krillian amusement, the sound like breaking bones. Human. Alone. This will be quick, he said, his voice grinding through the universal translator. Where's your crew? No crew. Just me. Kate kept her hands raised, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. Which wasn't hard, considering she was 5'6" and holding nothing more dangerous than a tablet. Take what you want. I don't want any trouble. Smart human. The leader gestured to his crew with 2 of his 4 arms. Search the ship. Take anything valuable. Strip the supplies. Then his eyes, black and multifaceted like a spider's, focused back on Kate. Move aside. We're taking everything. Including that void dragon we picked up on our scans. Dragon parts fetch very good prices in certain markets. Scales, bones, organs. All valuable. Something shifted in Kate's chest. The fear was still there, cold and sharp. But underneath it, something else rose up. Something that surprised even her. No. The single word hung in the recycled air of the corridor. One word, barely a whisper, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. The raider leader tilted his head, mandibles spreading in confusion. What did you say? Kate lowered her hands. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her voice came out steady. I said no. You can have the cargo. You can have my credits. You can take the food supplies, the spare parts, the emergency rations. Take it all. But you're not touching my dragon. The raiders laughed, a chittering sound like rocks grinding in a tumbler. It echoed off the metal walls, mocking and cruel. The leader stepped closer, his rifle rising slightly. Stupid human. Your species' sentimentality is a weakness. It's why you'll never survive in this galaxy. You care too much. Kate didn't move. Didn't back down. Maybe. But he's my friend. And I don't give up my friends. The leader's scarred shell seemed to darken. Move or I'll. Carthax exploded through the cargo bay door. I don't understand, Kara whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft breathing of her sleeping hatchlings. She'd finally settled onto the deck of the docking bay, her massive form folded as gently as possible with her 3 babies arranged around her like precious jewels. Her tail curled protectively around them, and one wing stretched out to create a makeshift shelter. I am their mother. This is what I am supposed to do. I should know how to comfort them. It's instinct. It's in my blood. Mike sat nearby, his back against the storage container, stretching his tired arms above his head. His shoulders ached from holding that first hatchling for nearly 30 minutes, and his lower back had that familiar twinge that came from standing in one position too long. But it was a good kind of tired. The kind that came from actually helping someone. You do know how to comfort them, he said, rolling his neck to work out a kink. Your instincts are good. They're just meant for a different environment. On your home world, your methods probably work perfectly. Every Drakvan mother probably does exactly what you were doing, and their babies settle right down. Kara's eyes, which had dimmed from their earlier bright yellow to a softer amber, studied the sleeping hatchlings. Then what changed? Why did everything I know stop working? The station, Mike said. The artificial gravity here is calibrated to what they call galactic standard. It's a compromise between all the different species that use crossroads. But it's not the same as your planet's gravity. Not the same frequency, not the same pull. These little ones, he gestured to the hatchlings, they're brand new. Their inner ears or whatever Drakvan have that does the same job, they're still developing. Still calibrating. And the gravity here feels wrong to them. Like they're constantly falling or spinning. Kara's head tilted, processing this. You said humans need this motion, this rocking, because of your world? Earth's tough, Mike admitted, and there was something in his voice, a kind of tired pride. Really tough. We've got weather that can change in minutes, go from sunny to a tornado without warning. Earthquakes that split the ground open. Floods, hurricanes, wildfires. And predators, tons of them, especially back when humans were evolving. Big cats, bears, wolves, things with teeth and claws that saw us as dinner. He paused, remembering something his grandfather used to say. Human babies are born completely helpless. Most alien species I've met, their young can at least stand up within hours, maybe walk within days. Human babies? Can't even lift their own heads for weeks. Can't walk for a year, sometimes longer. Can't truly fend for themselves for years and years after that. That sounds like a fatal flaw, Kara said quietly. It should have been, Mike agreed. But we adapted. We evolved to need constant contact, constant reassurance. Human mothers had to carry their babies everywhere while they hunted, while they gathered food, while they ran from danger. The babies who stayed calm during movements survived. The ones who cried and attracted predators didn't. So over thousands and thousands of generations, the motion itself became something we need to feel safe. It's programmed into us at a level deeper than thought. Kara studied him with something that looked like respect or maybe wonder. Your weakness became your strength. Mike smiled. Something like that. We're not the strongest species. Not the fastest. Not the toughest. But we're really good at figuring out solutions and adapting to things. He pulled his toolkit over, the battered metal box that went everywhere with him, and opened it. Inside were tools of every size, spare parts in labeled containers, and a data pad covered in scratches. He pulled out the pad and started sketching with his finger. Listen, I can build you something. A cradle that mimics the motion I was doing. It'll run on a simple motor, nothing fancy. You won't have to rock them manually all the time. You'll actually be able to sleep. Kara's eyes widened. You would do this? For us? Sure, why not? Mike was already mentally inventorying what he'd need. I've got spare parts all over this station. Been collecting them for years. And honestly, it's basic mechanics. Not that different from the gyroscope systems and ship stabilizers. He grinned, and there was something boyish in it despite his 30-some years. Besides, what else am I going to do? I finished the freighter repair 2 hours ago. My schedule is clear. Over the next hour, the docking bay became Mike's workshop. He disappeared into the station's maintenance areas and came back with armfuls of parts that most people would have thrown away years ago. Old gyroscopes from a navigation system that had been replaced last month. Padding from cargo netting that was too worn for heavy loads but perfect for cushioning. Motors from ventilation fans that still worked perfectly well, they just weren't regulation for the new safety standards. Some scrap metal for frames. Wire. Batteries. Fasteners. Kara watched in fascination as Mike's hands worked. He measured, cut, welded, and assembled with the kind of confidence that came from years of experience. He talked as he worked, explaining each step not because she asked but because he seemed to enjoy teaching. The first cradle took 40 minutes. The second took 30. By the third, he had the process down to 25 minutes flat. Each cradle was crude looking, no question about it. The welds were rough, the frames were made of mismatched metal, and the padding was definitely not color coordinated. But when Mike powered them on and they began to rock with that same gentle side-to-side motion, that same subtle bounce, they were perfect. He carefully lifted the first sleeping hatchling, the one he'd rocked to sleep in his arms, and placed it into the cradle. The little creature stirred slightly, made a small chirping sound, and then settled deeper into sleep. The motion continued, steady and reliable, powered by the simple battery pack underneath. Kara reached out with one massive claw, moving with a delicacy that seemed impossible for something so large. She touched the edge of the cradle, feeling it rock. You humans, she said softly, and there was something like awe in her voice. You are very strange creatures. Mike laughed, wiping sweat from his forehead and leaving a new smear of grease there. Yeah, we get that a lot. 3 weeks went by like they always did on the station. Mike spent his days fixing busted coolant systems, patching hull breaches, and keeping the old machinery running. It was regular work, the kind that made your back ache and your hands grimy. Nothing special. Nothing that made you think you'd changed anything. He was shoulder deep in a cooling unit, wrestling with a stubborn connector, when Beth's voice crackled through the comm system. Harris, you've got someone waiting for you at Bay 7. Mike pulled himself out, wiping the grease off his hands with an old rag. He figured something else had broken down. Maybe the bay doors were acting up again, or someone needed help unloading cargo. He made his way through the corridors, not expecting much. When he got to Bay 7, he stopped in his tracks. Kara stood there waiting for him. But she wasn't alone and she wasn't struggling like before. Her 3 hatchlings were with her and they'd grown. In just 3 weeks they doubled in size. They chirped happily, each one nestled in what looked like modified versions of the cradles Mike had built. The little ones rocked gently, content and healthy. You came back, Mike said, surprise clear in his voice. Kara looked at him with those golden eyes, and there was something different in her expression. Something softer. I came to honor a debt. Before Mike could say anything, Kara reached up to her neck. With visible effort, like it hurt, she pulled at one of her own scales. It came free with a small sound and she held it in her palm. The scale gleamed under the bay lights, crystalline and deep purple, catching the light like a gemstone. In my culture this is kinship, Kara said, her voice steady but emotional. You saved my children's lives. You are family now. Mike felt awkward like he always did when people made a big deal out of things. I just rocked some babies. That's all. You did what I could not, Kara said firmly. There was no arguing with that tone. She took the scale and attached it to a metallic chain. Then she stepped forward and placed it around Mike's neck. The scale was warm like it still held her body heat. I have shared your method with other Drakvan. 5 families, all with hatchlings, all struggling on stations and ships. All thriving now. Because of you. Mike felt his face get hot. He wasn't good with praise, never had been. Well, I'm glad it helped. Really? Kara's golden eyes held his, and in them he saw respect. Real respect. The galaxy knows humans as warriors, survivors, builders, she said slowly. Now they will also know you as caregivers. It is a greater strength than you realize. She gestured to her 3 hatchlings, who continued their happy chirping, rocking in their cradles like the motion was the most natural thing in the world. They will remember you in their songs. The small human who showed their mother gentleness when she had forgotten it existed. Mike didn't know what to say to that. Songs? He was just a maintenance guy who fixed broken things and apparently had a knack for calming down fussy babies. Nothing song-worthy about that. An hour later, Kara's ship departed. Mike watched it go from the observation window, the scale still warm against his chest. He touched it briefly, feeling the smooth surface, the strange texture that was somehow both hard and delicate. He went back to his work, but as the days passed he started noticing things. Small things. Changes. A Centauri trader who'd always looked through him like he was invisible gave him a nod in the corridor. Actually acknowledged him. A Vexan engineer stopped him one day to ask questions about human child-rearing practices. The conversation was awkward, full of translation hiccups, but it was genuine curiosity. Not mockery. Not dismissal. Curiosity. In the station's common areas he caught aliens looking at him differently. There was respect in those glances now. Respect where before there'd only been indifference or barely concealed contempt. Word spread fast in the close quarters of a space station. Stories traveled. The tale of the human mechanic who'd solved a problem that had stumped a Drakvan mother went around. Then it became the story of how his solution had helped 5 families. Then more. Mike didn't seek attention. He just kept doing his job. But the galaxy was learning something about humans, something that maybe they'd overlooked while focusing on humanity's wars, their survival instinct, their ability to build and expand and never give up. They were learning that humans knew how to be gentle. That humans understood care. That somewhere in humanity's harsh history, in all those generations of struggle and adaptation, they'd learned not just how to survive, but how to help others thrive. One simple act of kindness. 3 crying babies. A solution born from a world that had taught humans to be adaptable above everything else. To take what they had and make it work. To see a problem and think of creative solutions instead of giving up. Mike thought about Earth sometimes, about the stories of how tough life had been there. Harsh climates, limited resources, dangers everywhere. Humans had to be innovative. They had to care for their young in difficult circumstances. They had to find ways to soothe, to comfort, to help their babies sleep even when everything was working against them. That knowledge, that human experience had traveled to the stars. And now it was spreading, helping species that had never needed such adaptations before, species that were struggling with problems they'd never faced on their peaceful home worlds. As Mike headed back to his quarters that night, scale hanging around his neck, he realized something. The galaxy had always seen humanity's strength in their ability to fight, to survive, to push forward no matter what. And those things were true. Humans were survivors. But maybe the real strength, the one that would matter most out here among the stars, wasn't about fighting or building or refusing to quit. Maybe sometimes the greatest strength was just knowing how to rock a baby to sleep. Simple. Human. Universal. And somehow it was changing things.